And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. Our guest is author Father Maurice Emelu. Word for a Wounded World, Volume 1, believe it or not. That's right, published by Trinity Press. Oh, it's great to have you here, Father.
Thank you, Doug.
And of course, people know you from seeing you on the network. Before, you've done some series. You have that new series, which is basically on the air right now, which is this book is predicated on, right?
Yes.
So this is based on the series of talks that you gave, what it was, in Nigeria and Cameroon?
In Nigeria and Cameroon, in 5 different locations in Nigeria and Cameroon, the Archdiocese of Lagos, in the Diocese of Olo, and in the Archdiocese of Bamenda in Cameroon, in the Diocese of Boya, and that's it.
Right, so those are the 5, that's what the series...
The 4 dioceses, but 5 locations.
Okay.
So in Lagos, I had 2 locations in Lagos,
okay.
Ojota and Festac Town.
Right, and like I said, when you were on with Father Mitch back in September, I know you mentioned, was there 5 million Catholics in one
diocese of Lagos, yes.
Right, so. And you were talking about how rapidly the church is actually growing in Africa. You never know it. I mean, we hear it once in a while mentioned by our Holy Father or something out of Rome, but as far as the regular press, all we hear is about Boko Haram or something.
The mainstream media don't want to talk about it, because talking about it tells a different story they don't want to share. But the truth remains that the church in Africa is growing so much that we are hopeful of tomorrow.
Right. It's interesting, too, because many times when you hear about them oppressing groups like Boko Haram or whatever, you hear them maybe allude to the fact that they might be Christians, but very seldom do you understand that the people actually being persecuted many times are Catholics.
They are Catholics and also Christians, actually. You might want to know as well that Boko Haram kills Muslims too in that region. And that's a sorry sight of a state, because it's unimaginable. It's just irrational.
Well, we see it everywhere with the Shiite and the Sunni conflagration between
it's despicable.
Right. Well, let's talk about a word for a wounded world, because as obviously we're talking about things that are indicative of the wounded nature of the world. And is that why you dedicated this book to Our Lady of Sorrows, or is there some particular reason you have an attachment for her?
I have strong attachment to Our Lady of Sorrows, but for this book, I prefer to dedicate it to Our Lady of Sorrows because she went through the 7 sorrows. And identification with Our Lady of Sorrows, if you go to the last chapter of that book, I talked about our mother. You see the sorrows she passed through, and if you can bring your sorrows to the sorrows of Our Lady, you get the strength to wade through the cross and remain hopeful, remain triumphant, knowing that someday, sometime, it will be all right. Because you have the heavenly host backing you. You have the grace of God behind you, leading you through the crucibles and pains of life. So I felt that Our Lady captures that holistic approach in the true sense, not in the New Age sense of holistic approach of what I wanted to talk about. Yes.
Well, let me ask you, you say that Pope Francis said we should go out to the existential periphery. What did you think he meant by that, and how are you taking that call as what you're doing with this series and in this book?
Yeah, when the Holy Father talked about existential periphery, he was drawing the attention of the church to the new evangelization, where we have to reach out to the suburbs, where people have less ways and means of integration into the church, where there are less opportunities. We can reach out to those suburbs. That's more or less like physical and geographical existential periphery. But there is more to that, because in spite of the fact that some people live in wealthy neighborhoods, they live in cities, they don't have, some of them lose the sense of the peace of mind, peace of soul that the world cannot give. Remember what our Lord Jesus Christ told us, I give you peace, the peace the world will not give. That's what I give to you. So when somebody feels a sense of despair, desperation, a sense of hopelessness, he becomes spiritually in periphery situation, and that person needs hope. That person needs the gospel of peace, and it's the gospel of Christ that brings this hope, because Christ is our hope. So I was referring to both the suburb, the geographical existential periphery, and people who lose a sense of value of who they truly are, the sense of identity of who they truly are, a sense of fulfillment of why they are here, who lose a sense also of the purposeful nature of our journey on earth. So I wanted the two arms to be placed together.
Now, how do you think, in doing this series and reading this book, and you putting the book together based on the talks as the first volume, how do you think it plays outside of Africa? Is the message of the church in this way, and your message that you gave at these particular talks, does that transcend regions?
Doug, I would like to give you a little background of what informed this theme, because many people have asked me that question. It sounds Word for a Wounded World, for
right.
AWW. It sounds like more like new tech kind of language. How did you come up with that word for a wounded world? Over the years, during my retreat talks and visits and seminars and conferences, during private audiences, people come and they ask me, Father, can you speak a word or two to bring healing to our hurting hearts? We are wounded. Some are wounded emotionally. Some are wounded because of what's going on in the world, where so many people lose sense of hope. Some are wounded because of the bad blood in the polity and some policies that don't enhance well-being. Some are wounded because of moral failings. Some are also emotionally wounded. Some are wounded because of sin. And they want to hear a word or two that brings healing to them. So I said that, I said, you know, I think if God can inspire us to write something along those lines. And as I was preparing that, I read the document of Pope Benedict XVI on Africa Munus, the church in service of reconciliation, justice, and peace. And I saw this phrase, wounded world. And I was inspired by that. And more also down the line, Pope Francis came up with this whole theme of the church being the field hospital,
after the battle.
I say, wow, that's for me innovative. And I borrowed all that and spoke a word for each chapter to a particular situation. Now back to the question, is it relevant only to Africa? Not at all. Right. Most of those audiences I had were from the West. But then why did I go to Africa? Why did I make Africa the first audience from which I can now interpolate it to elsewhere else? It started with my relationship with EWTN, because they wanted more of African content to show the diversity of the church, the universality of the church. So I had to go to Africa. Well, thank you for trusting me that I can do that. So I went to Africa. And as I was going to Africa, it was like hell let loose.
Really?
So yes, because things started to change. Stories of Boko Haram, more killings, violence, Ebola. I say, wow, maybe the Lord wanted me to be here to deliver these talks from here.
To prepare people in some ways for what they had to do.
In some ways for what they had to deal with.
Like Our Lady of Kibeho in a sense.
That was like I said, God, I thank you, Lord, for leading me through this direction. And you needed to be there, Dog, to see what happened. So people revived.
And well, people can see in the series, and you know, the crowds you drew, and the energy and the faith that's there.
Yeah, it's inspiring. So I think this is relevant not just to Africa. It is relevant to people in Europe, in the United States,
and we believe the
Asia,
same thing, which is why we're airing it everywhere, obviously.
Thank you very much for doing that.
Of course we would. You know, it's interesting, too, you say, following what you're talking about, the Holy Father's field hospital after battle, you say, however, if we have wounds, we first need to be healed in order for us to effectively help others. Yes. And that's what you're talking about. And you talk about a particular woman that you talked to, and you said, sadly, a spirit of despair was discernible as she narrated her fears of the future. And then you go off to make a point. You said, I have met more people tossed between the past and the future like a wounded, hurting, in-between pendulum. What do you mean by that?
You know, the pendulum that is swinging like this, you know, they are like swinging, you know, with hurting experiences and wounds. And I needed some form of equilibrium. You know, what they say in philosophy, ataraxia. But this ataraxia is not just the abstract ataraxia. It is the equilibrium that comes from peace of soul that the gospel gives, that the word of God gives. And that was what I wanted to bring with the story of that woman. How can I bring that sense of peace to such a hurting heart?
Right.
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
Now you talk about, and you go through this in chapter after chapter. Now, right at the beginning on page number 1, the first chapter is called Pilgrims, and you see you and your creative team, including a couple of people I recognize, George Wincar, who's our rep in over in Africa, and Sam Zamaron, who works in our creative services with his lovely wife, both who went over there and worked on this project for you. Sam, an incredibly talented guy. And you start off with Pilgrims, and I thought it had to do with you as pilgrims, but it really has to do with the whole Pilgrim Church. You're tying it into that. And you say it's also known as the church militant. Now, there's a phrase that we don't hear too much anymore. But you talk about after 9/11, Pope John Paul said, even if the forces of darkness appear to prevail, those who believe in God know that evil and death do not have the final say. And you make a lot of and bring up, as our present Holy Father has, the use of the term relating to the devil. Now, to some people in the West, we have we say, oh, the devil, kind of a medieval kind of approach to things. I guess maybe in Africa that plays. It's a good way for them to understand. But that's not the reality. The devil is the reality, right?
Yeah, you see, I wanted to write freely. I wanted to write what I believe in. I wanted to write what I think is biblical, what I think is magisterial. I didn't want to sample opinionated views of individual theologians that may or may not agree with Scripture. I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. And Christian theology starts with the story of the fall. Without the fall, there wouldn't be redemption. And the story of the fall is tied into the tempter itself, who tempted the first parents. I know there are so many arguments about how factual that narrative is, but the issue remains that evil can come in many ways, and there is the personification of evil, and that's Satan, that's the devil itself. During the temptation of our Lord Jesus Christ, he tempted the Lord. So St. Thomas Aquinas will say there are 3 classes of it.
Right, you have them in there.
I have them in there.
Right.
The world, when they are completely opposed to the truth. After all, what is the classical Greek definition of the devil? Diabolos, the deceiver. The deceiver of our brethren, who deceives them day and night before the Lord.
And the big thing he deceives people about today is that he doesn't exist.
He doesn't. That's his greatest deceit. That's his strategy. He does not. I do not exist. When you believe that the devil does not exist, then you can do anything. But the devil exists. He tempts people. He deceives people. And we have to be very, very authentic to the Scripture. Yes, some will say this African, he's bringing his own African mentality in the whole show. Well, I will ask, we make more effort to do pure journalistic investigation into the reality of the spiritual. Don't we have stories of haunted homes? Don't we have stories of people who are really, really possessed, that the church will have even the institution of exorcism? And you think that that's just fallacy? Well, I'm a Christian. And I'm talking about Christian theology. In Christian theology, authentic Christian theology, biblical theology, magisterial theology, there is the devil. I don't care who the theologian there who doesn't believe in it. It's his opinion. I believe in the Bible. I believe in the magisterial.
So that is why as Pilgrims we have to be smart and alert. The devil is a crafty strategist who uses many methodologies to trap people. And you talk about the idea of sin is a sharp object in the moral realm. You're talking here about the senses. What do you mean it's a sharp object?
I'm glad you really read that book. I put you to work. That's good.
You always do.
Yeah, you see, it's a very imagery, is a play of imagery I wanted to use to bring out the true picture of what sin does. Original sin, during original sin, we lost our original righteousness.
And that's really the wound, really.
That's really the fundamental wound
we're talking
about.
But
we get healed and continue to be healed by the grace of God. our Lord Jesus Christ who died on the cross. And through baptism, we are now renewed and once again. But the scares are there. What the church calls concupiscence, the vulnerability to sin. But concupiscence in itself is not sinful, but it makes us vulnerable. That's why sometimes I want to do the, St. Paul would say, I want to do right, but I find myself doing the wrong thing.
Right, why did I do that? Right.
Yeah, why did I do that? So because of that vulnerability, we may also be led astray if we don't take time. But then when we recognize that we are saved, the sharp object becomes anytime I willfully decide to do the wrong. I am scratching the old scare of the old fall. Take, for instance, lying. Anytime I willfully lie, I am scratching the old scare of deceit. The Bible tells us that the devil is the father of all lies. So I'm scratching the old scare of deceit. Isn't it fascinating to see people who lie sometimes and lie and lie and lie? Over the years, they become liars that they don't even know when they are lying.
They don't know the truth is.
they don't know what the truth is. So they have scratched this and scratched.
Well, they've decided that whatever they believe is true.
It's true.
It's true.
So it happens in there. So I wanted us to avoid that kind of using sharp object.
Right. And you've got a great section in here where you talk about, you quote Bishop Sheen.
Bishop Sheen,
and talking about how it happens, and a few adaptations from St. Augustine.
Yes.
About how, and again, it's the gradual decline for most of it.
And I can list it because it's top here, right there.
Right. It's right in the book.
Strategy of the enemy to pull us down.
Page 15.
To make us
the
prisoners.
book and read it. Yeah.
Page 15.
Right.
Yeah, it's right there.
It's right there. One of the other things I thought was funny, you talked about in a section, there's this big, giant, beautiful statue of our Lord standing, a statue of Christ the King at St. Teresa's Parish Church in the diocese, your diocese,
My
right?
diocese, yes.
Okay, and it says stop, 4-letter word, and then you say in the USA and UK, a traffic stop sign is exactly what it signifies, stop and continue at the green light. In Mexico City, some say it's a suggestion. Here in Lagos, it's an opinion. The virtue of temperance means stop and live self-control, but what happens if we don't obey our spiritual goalposts?
Disaster.
Right.
That's what happens.
Right.
So sometimes we need to stop. And I wanted to play on words with that stop. Instead of talking about the virtue of self-control, temperance, some people will get some temperance, he comes again with this is kind of virtue theology. I now say, oh, let you stop. When somebody hurts you, when you are wounded, maybe by somebody, there is always the natural tendency to pay back. And one thing is clear, if you are annoyed or if you are deeply wounded, the likelihood that you will return what has been done to you worse. Once you become reactionary, you may not act right.
Right.
You know, and stop is a good strategy of saying, wait a minute.
Right.
You know, take a deep breath. Think about it. The next chapter after stop is think.
Right.
So when you stop, you just think about it.
Well, you talk about the idea of don't push that send button on your computer, right, on your email.
I'm talking as a priest.
Right.
From pastoral experience, do you know many families that have been destroyed because the man sent a text to the wife when he was annoyed, or the wife sent a text to the man when she was annoyed, a text that devastated the family.
Right.
Many families are destroyed just because you were annoyed and you sent that text. Bam!
Right.
The email, wham! But you've sent it.
Right.
You can't take it back.
Right.
Even if the person forgives you, the person will always remember the harsh words you used, the bad words you said, and you can't take that back. So stop.
Well, here's the, who was the grandfather who passed along when you were terribly hurt, poor memory is your best response?
Yes, it's a popular saying, and I didn't want to be specific about the grandfather.
Another part you talk about in the think, and I thought think was really good because you're really talking about the noise we all work in and all live, the fact that we go through so many things that we don't understand necessarily how much we're reactive.
Yes.
And that we're not taking the time, and that we need to take the time, especially in the world we live in today, to think about the things that we should be thinking about. Obviously, God, our family, and making sure our priorities are correct. Right?
Yes, and I'm also a victim of this. And most of us who are involved in the media, we have so many things going on. This gadget, this social media, television. Sometimes we are so gripped by all those things that we don't have time of introspection, of deep reflection, of asking ourselves, let us just tune off and just be with God alone.
Right.
Those serene moments, contemplation is healthy. You know, it is needed in the world today because we have to really, really kind of detoxicate.
Right, exactly, right.
And just refresh our spiritual sense, refresh our relationship with God, and it's healthy to do that. Right. So I will encourage those who are going to read this book to find some time
and watch the series,
and watch the series, of course. But I'm not saying you have to watch good programs on TV. I'm not discouraging you from watching good programs.
Well, you can read the book while you're watching.
You cannot.
And to dovetail into that, you roll into the chapter 5, Awake, and you talk about self-awareness is crucial to spiritual awareness, which you were just basically saying. I think the worst lie is to lie to oneself.
Yes.
And it's easy to do if you don't stop and think very much, right?
Yes. You just like the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, and it says about those who have I think the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. You have the plank in your eyes, and you don't. You want to see remove the straw in your neighbor's eye.
Now, one of the things you brought out here that kind of tied in a little bit to. We were talking a little bit about the cultural aspect, though you wrote this and you gave the talks in such a way that they are very clearly understandable by an international audience. But one of the things you do tell a story I thought was interesting here about a missionary who went to Tanzania in the early days of Christianity, East Africa. Tell that story.
The story is about this missionary who came to, very zealot missionary, went to Tanzania in those early days of Christianity in East Africa. And he was talking about Christ and talking about vocation. People got excited about what he was saying, and they wanted to know more. They wanted to know the person, and they asked him, "Oh, do you have family?" He said, "Yes, I'm from a family." "But are you married?" He said, "No, I'm not married." "Do you have children?" "I don't have children." "Do you have farmland?" "I don't have farmland." "Do you have cows and goats?" "I don't have any of those." They said, "No, we're not going to trust you." The problem was that in their culture, in their native culture, any responsible man marries, has children, has farmland, and maybe goats and cattle. Now, it's because he was not culturally sensitive of the culture he was preaching. Why I used that story was to encourage cultural sensitivity and enculturation. And the Catholic Church is doing it. Whenever the Catholic Church is sending missionaries to other countries, those countries, they try to lead those missionaries through enculturation, so that you can understand the culture of the people and tell stories that will blend with their culture, so you don't lose your audience. Down the line, they understood that priests don't marry. Down the line, they understood that. But that first, initially, it was like a shocker to them.
I thought he was kind of a lazy layabout,
good for nothing layabout, kind of
going around just giving talks and stuff like that.
So that's why I spiced the work with so many African stories like that will make you laugh, even proverbs that you may not even pronounce.
I know you were talking about that with Father Mitch back in September, and it is great to realize how the wisdom of the world is universal.
Yes.
That it transcends. It may be said in a different way, in a different context, but the message is the same.
It's the same.
That's why we all laugh.
If I will put you to task, if you go to one of the chapters and see any of the African proverbs, try to read it. Let me see how you would do that. You can. I know you can't.
Well, one of the other things that struck me too with this and with the talks you give and things like that is the whole idea. You talk really about the true faith and understanding, the Catholic understanding of suffering, especially when you're dealing with audiences who, as you've said, have not only experienced suffering over their lives. You're dealing with a lot of people who are, from a United States living quality of life would be considered on the lower end of the spectrum. But they're happy people. And I think you were even talking about that, I know, with Father Mitch about, being happy. And sometimes I think that's where the Western mentality of what's supposed to make people happy is so askew, because we think, well, the reason these people are doing these bad things and stuff is because they don't have freedom, they don't have money, they don't have cars, they don't have this. And they don't really understand, in many times, the spiritual aspect of what's important in one's life. Even sometimes to the negative side that we see with some terrorism.
I started the chapter on hope, with when a bishop from Nigeria, and actually it's my bishop, Bishop Gregory, Augustine Okwama, when he came visiting the U.S. And he was asked by some people, why is it that Africans, in spite of the fact that materially they are poor, but they are happy, they seem to be happy? He said it's because they have hope, and it's because they have faith in God.
Right.
Hope and faith in God. Think about it. If you don't have hope, what are you living for? If you don't have faith that after all this struggle, that our life is not just wasted, that there is value to it, then how can you be happy? It's not all about the kind of car you ride. Cars, the best car will last for, after 1 year you begin to, let me get a new one. 2 years, 3 years. The best homes, after some years you see them dilapidated. Let's look for lasting value. And that nobody can take away from us. That economic recession cannot take away from us.
Right.
That's what gives happiness. I may not give you what it is, but look for what it is. And if you find it, you'll be happy.
That's right, the pearl of great price. That's what you talk about basically in this book. Thank you so much, Father. Well,
thank you,
unfortunately, we live in a world with time clocks, and we're just out of it. Speaking with Father Maurice Emelu about Word for a Wounded World. Now, this is Volume 1. It's printed out by Trinity Press, but it's available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Go to our EWTN Religious Catalog website, and that's www.religiouscatalog.com. And you can order this book and take a look also at the DVDs of his new series. Father Maurice Emelu is a great light for us here at EWTN. Thank you so much for joining us right here on EWTN's Bookmark. We'll see you next time.